Ever have an idea? One of those, this could be huge ideas. But then that little voice pops up. What if it flops?
That voice, that's the voice of risk. Everyone feels it.
Exactly. And that's what we're tackling today. Think of it as Idea Insurance 101.
I like that. We're diving into the world of low-budget validation, how to test those million-dollar ideas, even if you're working with, well, way less than $1 million.
We've got a stack of articles, case studies, real-world examples of companies who nailed it, and some who, well, learned the hard way.
Because those lessons, those are golden.
Absolutely. So whether you're just dipping your toes into entrepreneurship or you're a seasoned pro, this deep dive's for you.
Because here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you've got venture capitalists on speed dial or you're bootstrapping it in your basement. Low-budget validation is that crucial first step.
It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once. You don't build a house without a blueprint, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you don't launch a business, a product, a service without validating that there's actually a need, a desire for it.
And that validation, it doesn't have to be this big, expensive production. In fact, some of the most successful companies out there, they started with surprisingly simple, low-budget tactics.
It's true. And we're going to unpack all of that, from the scrappy beginnings of companies you know and love to cautionary tales that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about launching an idea.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a story that's become almost legendary in the startup world. A couple of guys, a few air mattresses, and a city overflowing with designers desperate for a place to crash.
Ah, yes, the Airbnb origin story.
Yep.
It's a classic example of how solving a personal problem, even in the most unexpected way, can lead to massive success.
Right. I mean, they weren't industry titans. They were just two guys trying to make rent in one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Exactly. Brian and Joe, they were staring down the barrel of a rent deadline and realized something interesting. Their city was about to be flooded with designers for a big conference, and hotels were booked solid.
Light bulb moment, right?
Big time. They saw an opportunity, a need, and they decided to test it in the simplest way possible. They weren't trying to create the next big hotel chain. Not yet, anyway.
Instead of getting bogged down and building a fancy platform, they created a basic website, air bed and breakfast, threw some air mattresses on the floor of their apartment, and boom, their minimum viable product, MVP, was born.
Low budget, absolutely. Effective. History speaks for itself.
I mean, those first three guests, the ones who took a chance on a couple of guys with air mattresses, they weren't just customers, they were proof of concept.
Validation in its purest form. Those three guests proved that people, at least in that specific context, were hungry for something different, something more affordable, more authentic than the traditional hotel experience.
And that's the beauty of their story, right? They didn't need millions in funding. They didn't need a team of developers. They just needed to identify a problem, craft a solution, and put it out there in the world.
And that, my friend, is the essence of low-budget validation. It's about taking action, testing your assumptions, and letting the market tell you if you're onto something special.
So Airbnb, they had a tangible offering, even if it was just an air mattress and a warm smile. But what if your idea is digital, something like an app or an online service? How do you validate that without, building the entire thing first?
That is a fantastic question. And for that, we turn to a company called Buffer, a company that took low-budget validation to a whole new level.
Buffer, right. Social media scheduling made easy.
Exactly. But before Buffer was, well, Buffer, it was just an idea brewing in Joel Gascoigne's mind.
And I'm guessing he didn't have a team of developers and a massive marketing budget just waiting to make his dream a reality.
Not quite. He was bootstrapping it, just like our Airbnb guys. But he knew he couldn't just dive headfirst into coding. He needed to figure out if people actually wanted what he was planning to build.
So how did he do it? Did he just tell everyone he knew and hope for the best?
He got a lot more strategic than that. Remember how we talked about MVPs, minimum viable products? Well, Joel took that concept to a whole new level. He created an MVP of a website.
An MVP of a website? What does that even mean?
It means he built the absolute bare minimum to get his idea in front of potential users. We're talking 2 pages, folks.
2 pages. Okay, I'm intrigued, but I've got to admit I'm a little skeptical. What could he possibly achieve with just 2 pages?
Those 2 pages were pure genius. The first page, it laid out his vision for Buffer, what it was, how it would work, the problem it solved. Think of it as a super compelling sales pitch, all about the benefits of this amazing new tool.
So far, so good. shocker.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The second page, the one you got to by clicking plans and pricing.
Yeah, every website has that, right?
That-
That's where you see what you get, how much it costs.
Except, in Buffer's case, there were no plans and no pricing. Instead, visitors got a message that said something like, "We're in development, but sign up to be the first to know when we launch." He was essentially asking people to pre-order a product that didn't even exist yet.
He was straight up asking people to buy into his vision without a single line of code written. I love it. So, did it work?
Oh, it worked like a charm. Within weeks, he had over 100 signups from people who were so excited about his idea that they were willing to hand over their email addresses and say, "Sign me up."
That's amazing. He validated his entire concept with a 2-page website.
It's a powerful reminder that you don't need a finished product to gauge interest. You just need a clear value proposition and a way to communicate it effectively to your target audience.
Okay, so we've got Airbnb proving their concept with air mattresses and Buffer racking up signups with a website that wasn't even a real website yet. But let's be real, not every startup story is a fairy tale. We've got those cautionary tales too, right? The ones that remind us that even with the best intentions, things can go horribly wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And those cautionary tales, they're not just about the companies that crashed and burned. They're about the mistakes they made, the lessons we can all learn from so we don't repeat them ourselves.
Exactly, because sometimes understanding what not to do is just as valuable as knowing what works. So let's dive into the first cautionary tale, Webvan, the online grocery delivery service that had, shall we say, a bumpy ride.
Ah, Webvan, a classic example of a company that had it all: a brilliant idea, a massive market opportunity, and, get this, almost $1 billion in funding.
$1 billion. Okay, now we're talking serious money. What went wrong?
They made a fatal mistake.
Sure.
They mistook funding for validation. They assumed that because they had money, success was guaranteed.
Ah, the old if you build it, they will come mentality.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And to be fair, they were onto something big. Online grocery delivery, it's huge now. But back then, it was a completely new concept.
So instead of, I don't know, testing the waters, they decided to dive headfirst into the deep end.
They did a cannonball into the deep end without checking if there was any water in the pool first. They spent a huge chunk of that funding building a massive infrastructure, automated warehouses, fleets of delivery trucks, the whole shebang, before proving they could even make the model work on a smaller scale.
So instead of starting small, validating their assumptions, and then scaling gradually, they went all in, all at once.
And that, my friend, is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. You can't shortcut the process of testing and refining your model, no matter how much money you have.
Okay, so lesson learned, don't let funding replace validation. Got it. But Webvan, they at least built something, right? What about those companies that get so caught up in the hype, the technology, that they forget about the most important part, the users?
You're talking about companies like Color, the photo sharing app that had so much buzz, so much potential, but ultimately failed to connect with their audience.
Color, right. They had some big-name investors, a ton of hype. What was their downfall?
They assumed their product was so revolutionary, so groundbreaking, that people would automatically flock to it. They were so focused on the technology, the features, that they completely overlooked the users.
It's like they forgot that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how cool your technology is if nobody understands how to use it, or worse, why they would want to use it in the first place.
Exactly. And that's a trap that's easy to fall into, especially in the tech world, where there's this constant pressure to be innovative, to be the next big thing. But innovation without validation, it's like a tree falling in the forest with nobody around to hear it. Does it even make a sound?
I love that analogy because it highlights that no matter how brilliant your idea is, if it doesn't resonate with your target audience, it's going to fall flat.
Exactly. And that's why low-budget validation is so crucial. It's about testing your assumptions, getting feedback from real users, and iterating based on that feedback.
So we've had our dose of cautionary tales. We've seen what not to do. Now let's flip the script and look at how some of the biggest names in tech, companies that are practically household names today, use those same principles of low-budget validation to become, well, the giants they are today, ready to be inspired.
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk Dropbox. Everyone and their grandma has used Dropbox, but I bet most people don't know the story behind their launch, how they validated their idea in a way that was, well, Totally genius.
It's a classic example of thinking outside the box. Or maybe I should say outside the hard drive. You
Yeah.
see, Drew Houston, Dropbox's founder, he had this brilliant but super complex idea.
File syncing, right. Seamless, automatic, across all your devices. That's not exactly a walk in the park to build.
Exactly. We're talking serious engineering, tons of development time, and let's be real, a mountain of cash. And Drew, well, he was working with more of a molehill at the time.
So he's sitting on this potentially game-changing idea, but needs to prove it's not just him who wants this.
Exactly. He could have poured every last penny into building it, crossed his fingers, and hoped for the best. But Drew, he's a smart guy. He asked himself, how do I validate demand for this thing before I build it?
Okay, so how did he do it? Did he cobble together some kind of bare-bones version of Dropbox?
Nope. Even simpler than that. He made a video.
A video. Hold on. He's going to convince the world he's built this complex file syncing service with a video.
Not just any video. This was a meticulously crafted 3-minute explainer video. It was all about showing, not telling.
Yeah.
He focused on the problem Dropbox solved, how it worked, its sheer brilliance, all wrapped up in a neat little package that anyone could understand.
So he's got this video. What does he do? Upload to YouTube. Hope it goes viral.
He goes with the Techies Hangout, a little site called Hacker News. He posts the video, includes a sign-up form for the beta version, which, by the way, didn't exist yet, and waits.
I'm already hooked. What happened?
The internet did what the internet does best. It exploded. People were blown away by the simplicity of Dropbox, how it just made sense. His website was flowed with traffic, hundreds of thousands of visitors, all thanks to a 3-minute video.
And that beta waiting list, I'm guessing it went through the roof?
Overnight, it exploded from 5,000 to 75,000 people. Validation? Check. Drew had proven the demand for Dropbox before writing a single line of code.
That is incredible. It just shows the power of storytelling, of getting people excited about a solution, even if it's not quite a reality yet.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of clever validation, let's talk about Zappos. Remember them? They kind of made buying shoes online a thing.
Well, Zappos, another great example of challenging assumptions. Back then, buying shoes online, it seemed crazy. People want to try shoes on, feel them, see how they look.
Right. It's not like you can just download a pair of shoes. So how do you convince people to buy shoes online when the whole point of a shoe store is to, actually go to a store?
Nick Swinmurn, Zappos founder, he had this trick up his sleeve. It's called the Wizard of Oz method. Picture this. You go to a website, looks like a regular online shoe store. You browse, you pick your size, you click order, but behind the scenes, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What was actually happening when people placed those orders?
Nick himself was running the whole show. He'd get an order, head down to local shoe stores, buy the shoes, then ship them out himself. It was like a one-man shoe delivery operation.
He was the wizard behind the curtain, making the magic happen. So scrappy. But, did it work?
It did. He didn't have to invest in tons of inventory up front. He was buying on demand, based on actual customer purchases, all the while giving people the experience of a fully functioning online shoe store.
That is seriously clever. And it obviously worked because didn't Amazon end up acquiring them?
For a cool $1 billion. Proof that sometimes you got to get your hands dirty, experiment, and not be afraid to fake it till you make it, all in the name of validation.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the company that needs no introduction, Amazon. But we're not diving into the everything under the sun giant it is today. We're rewinding back to its humble beginnings, way back when it was just an online bookstore.
Yes, Amazon, a prime example of starting small, even when you have ambitions as big as Jeff Bezos.
So instead of trying to be, Amazon from day one, he started with just books. Was it a love of literature, or was there a strategy behind that?
Oh, there was a method to his madness. Books, they're relatively cheap to get, easy to ship, and they don't exactly go bad if they sit on a shelf for a while. It was the perfect testing ground for his grand vision of e-commerce.
It's like he used books as his MVP, proving that people would actually buy stuff online before expanding to, everything else.
Exactly. By focusing on just one category, he could really fine-tune that whole online ordering, delivery, customer service experience. He validated his way to world domination one book at a time.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into low-budget validation, what have we learned? We've seen how Airbnb used air mattresses to tap into a market need, how Buffer validated their idea with a 2-page website, and how Dropbox went viral with an explainer video. We've explored the cautionary tales of Webvan and Color, reminding us that even with the best intentions, things can go sideways if you don't validate your assumptions. And we've seen how even giants like Amazon and Dropbox started small, using scrappy tactics to test and refine their way to greatness.
It's been quite a journey. And the key takeaway, it's simple. Low-budget validation, it's not about being cheap. It's about being smart. It's about mitigating risk, about proving your concept before you go all in.
It's about testing, iterating, and not being afraid to get your hands dirty. So what seemingly crazy idea will you test? What problem are you going to solve? You don't need a huge budget or a fancy business plan. You just need to be willing to get creative, to put your idea out there, and let the market be your guide. Until next time.
See you then.